Welcome everyone. Thank you all for letting me know that I was muted. I am now free to talk. Haere mai, welcome everyone. Come on in. It's really great to have you all here, and we're just going to take a few minutes here at the beginning just to give everyone a chance to arrive. I just wanted to say that it's nice to have you all here. I've got the background behind me, but I'm currently in my work office because I'm deemed essential enough to be traveling to work. So it's really nice to have you all virtually with me in my therapy room, which feels very nice for me, and it's nice to welcome you all in. We are just going to take a few more minutes, just to probably another minute or so, just to let people arrive. So just to say a couple of things. Feel free to use the chat function to let us know whereabouts you are in the country and whereabouts you're joining us from. And for anyone here who's not been on Zoom before, all the participants are currently muted, but what we will be doing is we will be taking questions via the chat function. So over the last few days, we've had questions come in, but we will be taking questions throughout. So feel free to fire those through as we get into the meeting. And Rosalie, who's helping me out tonight, will be sending those through along with a speaking order, and we hope to get through some of those questions. We may not get through all of them, and the ones that we don't, we'll hope to answer afterwards. So welcome on in. So I'm just putting up the gallery view, which for those of you who are first time Zoom users, you might just want to chuck your hand up if this is the first time you've ever been on a Zoom call before. Oh, that's great. So there's quite a few first time Zoom users. So let me just orient you quickly to a couple of things. The first thing is there's a speaker versus gallery view. If you just want to see the person that's speaking, chuck that onto speaker view. If you want to see how many people are here, and currently there's about 4 pages of you, which is wonderful, you can put that onto the gallery view. And we will be recording this meeting and adding subtitles later for accessibility reasons. So without any further ado, and I'm aware of the time, I'm going to hand over first of all to Marama, who is going to open the meeting for us and open things for us with a karakia, I believe.
Kia ora koutou. So a thumbs up please if people can hear me. Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much. I'm going to open us up with karakia. This karakia was written by the brilliant Scotty Morrison, who many of you may know, who graces our television screens often with te kārere. So, tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho, kia tau wai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. That is, come forth from above, come forth from below, come forth from within and from the environment. Vitality and well-being for all, strengthened in unity. Kia ora koutou katoa. If I can just quickly show everybody and apologise also. I'm coming to you from a tent in my backyard, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, like many people who are adjusting to a new way of having to work at home, my bubble is quite a large bubble, and spaces to work from home are at a premium. So I apologise. We're trying to do the best I can with noise and what have you, but I'm coming from a tent, so I will quickly end up muting because I can hear the rain. That's brilliant. Excellent. I'll put the virtual background back on now, and I believe from here I'm actually going to hand you straight over to James, which is a good thing because the rain's getting stronger from my end for now, and I will be speaking with you all shortly. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Marama, thank you for that. And we are now just going to jump across to James, who's going to talk about the government response. James.
Well, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to have you on. So I mean, quite clearly, our government's main priority for the past several weeks, in terms of the decisions that we've made, have been around making sure that everybody in New Zealand and our families, our whānau, are as safe as they can be, and to slow the spread of COVID-19 and of the virus. So the result of that is immediately obvious to everyone, right? And that on Wednesday night we went into level 4 alert, which means that basically the entire country, other than essential services, is completely shut down, and we all are largely confined to our homes. And so I just want to say thank you on behalf of everybody, actually, for doing your bit and helping to save lives by staying at home. I know that there's been quite a lot of media stories about, exceptions, people who have kind of done silly things like hold COVID parties, or, have gone for group walks, or, those sort of things. But actually, those are the exceptions rather than the rule. And the vast majority of New Zealanders are actually doing what is necessary for us to do, and that is remaining at home, other than for kind of, walks to the pharmacy or to the supermarket. It is too early to tell how successful that strategy is. You'll see, obviously, every day there's news, with an increase in the number of cases identified. And very sadly, yesterday we had the first death related to COVID-19. But we are doing the things that are necessary as a country. And those things can only work if everybody works together. So, there's been a lot of use of the language of apart together. And actually, this has been a time over the last few days where we have seen New Zealanders really come together, obviously not physically, but as human beings. And so we're really encouraged by that. It is, of course, still quite early. We're almost through our first week, but obviously the strains of the situation will grow rather than diminish as the days pass on. And so as that happens, I guess I just want to encourage everyone to keep checking in with your families and with your colleagues and your co-workers to make sure that they're okay, and that they're getting the kind of support that they need. There is obviously another component to this, which will become more obvious over the course of the last few days, and that is to ensure that as many people as possible stay employed and continue to have work, and that everybody has access to all of the most essential products, food, goods and services that they need. And so, you'll have seen again a lot of talk about essential businesses and essential supplies and so on, and the ability of those things to remain open, of course, over these few weeks. That's not without controversy. There are lots of things that we might consider to be essential, but the principle here is that we need to really close down person-to-person contact as much as is logistically possible. And so what that has meant is that we've had to restrict what businesses can stay open or how they can operate to an extraordinary degree. This is, of course, only the third time that a national state of emergency has been declared in New Zealand. And so it does come with some quite extraordinary circumstances. And so, that was a decision that I know that our government did not take very lightly. And it was with great reluctance that we felt that the situation warranted it. But so far, it looks like the vast majority of New Zealanders agree that these extraordinary times call for some extraordinary measures. So the short version is you're doing great. New Zealand is doing great. It's probably going to be tougher before it gets easier, but we're off to a good start. And for that, you and your families and your co-workers and so on have to be commended. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for those reassuring words and for the clarity. And just to remind people that we are going to have time for questions, so feel free to pop those through on the chat. They will be going through directly to Rosalie, and with the time that we have left at the end, I'll be addressing some of those questions to James and Marama. But I'm going to hand back now to Marama, who is also going to say a few words. Marama.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just pleased that the rain has stopped a little more, so I hope that that's going to be a little bit clearer hearing for everybody. Look, I just want to acknowledge again that going into this stay home situation for our country has been exceptionally hard for many different people in many ways. I want to reassure people that we as MPs and all of our staff and our teams are seeing it and hearing and feeling every single day the many challenges that people are facing as we go down into this stay home situation. And I want people to know we're definitely working through and passing those issues on with our government partners. But I have to be very clear how grateful I am for the generosity and community spirit that we have seen across the countries. Big actions, small actions, down at the neighbourhood level, the flax roots level, people helping out. And we were only ever going to get through and help to try and stop the spread of this virus with everyone trying to step up. Government, as James mentioned, went through quite a lot of changes and assistance in many different forms, but it was always going to be the community leadership that was going to be essential, and I've seen it everywhere. And so a big thanks. And I also just wanted to acknowledge again our frontline and essential workers who we know are going out every single day, leaving their families. Some, I know I've got various households in my extended whānau who have had to put their children in isolation in a whole nother home so that they don't put their children or their elderly people at risk. I know that people are making all sorts of sacrifices to keep going to work so that we can continue to survive and to function as normal as we possibly can in these not normal circumstances. So I just wanted to add my heartfelt thanks and acknowledgement of knowing how this has been for many people. Some of those issues we'll be picking up, of course, through our questions. And thank you for making me and making the Greens really proud in the aroha and the manaaki that we have seen throughout our neighbourhoods. Kia ora, Kyle, back to you.
Kia ora, Marama. So what we have now is we've got 7 questions that came through via Instagram primarily, I believe. And some of them are sort of questions that were asked a number of times that we've collapsed into a single question. And some of them were seemingly quite important questions for us to focus on. As I said, feel free to fire more questions through on chat and we'll get to as many as we can. But James, this first question is for you. So why are some places open and some places aren't? What's the reasoning for this? For example, why are some grocers and some butchers not open? Why aren't places that provide PJs and heaters considered an essential service, especially when heading into winter?
That's a great question. So, like I said in my sort of introductory remarks, the principle that we're operating to here is to reduce the person-to-person contact as much as possible across the whole country. And there are some businesses where we think that we're able to manage the kind of processes and systems that they have to sort of minimize not just contact between people, but also from a person to like a product to another person, you know, so that kind of handling of whether it's food or some kind of product or something like that, because of course the virus can live on surfaces for up to a few days. And so one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that the organisations that stay open have got really good processes, and we can't guarantee that across the country. things that have remained open really are, I mean, the main thing is to make sure everyone's got access to food and to make sure everyone's got access to medicines, which is why the supermarkets and the pharmacies have remained open. I actually went to the pharmacy today, and they've actually set up, the pharmacy that I go to has set up a barrier at the door so that you can't actually go into the store, and the pharmacist actually comes over and stands 2 meters away and says, what do you want? And then they have a till set up by the door with a pay wave and so on. So they've really thought through how to kind of make sure that, you know, to minimize the handling there. The dairies have remained open because there are some people for whom getting to a supermarket is actually just not a viable option. And so we, you know, to you know, particularly people who have sort of accessibility issues. So we have let dairies stay open, but with quite strict controls. So, for example, they can only have one person in the store at once. They have to sort of do a strict one in, one out rule. And also they can't sell food that they've prepared on the premises. They can only sell kind of prepackaged, you know, the vast majority of their goods, of course, but those sort of things. Now, when it comes to things like electric blankets and heaters and those sort of things, what we are going to be doing is stores like the Warehouse or Briscoe's will be able to sell those items online and have them delivered, because we recognize a lot of people often leave those sort of purchases up until the first big cold snap, which, of course, if you're a Wellingtonian, you've just had your first big cold snap. So people in Wellington are certainly aware that winter is coming. And so that service is not yet available. And that's because it's not very easy for those businesses to only sell some items through their website and not others, because they've got to reorganize their whole kind of online commerce arrangements. And the reason why we're restricting it just to those goods, so things like electric blankets and heaters and so on, is because, again, we're just trying to minimize person-to-person transmission. And we also want to make sure that, you know, people who just want to buy a nice vase or a lamp or, you know, those sort of things aren't clogging up the system. And you know, you would have seen that the supermarkets have been struggling to meet demand for online, you know, home delivery. And so we don't want to replicate that through, you know, your Briscoes and your Warehouses and so on. But the intention there is that those kinds of goods will be available online soon. And when they've managed to get that up and running, we'll be able to announce about it. But the basic principle here is to really minimize the points of contact, and that's why so many businesses have had to shut.
Great, thank you, James. And I didn't have to interrupt you because you went exactly to time.
Oh, what is my?
It was 4 minutes. I should have said that. I was actually going to interrupt the speakers with 1 minute to go, but you hit it on the head. So there we go. So the next question that I have is for Marama. How is the government checking in on vulnerable and marginalised communities to see if they are okay? And I will just give you 1 minute when you get close to the time.
Sure thing. We're very aware that those with the least resource and the least support, those families, people and communities are going to need to have strong voice and have those issues raised as a priority. And the Green Party is proud to be well placed to be able to take those voices into all of the decisions that we are making, because that has been a priority for us across many terms and across our kaupapa. So we're very conscious that often the best people, the people and the organisations who are best placed to check in on those with the least resource and the least support are those grassroots, community groups, NGOs, not government departments solely at all. And that's why last week we announced a $27 million package to go towards helping those frontline community groups and NGOs who are the best placed, who have the relationships and the respect of people who are really struggling in their respective communities, to be able to support them to do their work, to continue to provide their essential service work, like providing food, finding a place for people to live, supporting people with a disability, and supporting families to live lives safely, so domestic violence organisations. And we're very aware that we need to support those organisations to do their work in a way that is safe and keeps the well-being and minimises the contact so that we can stop the spread and minimise the spread. So that's something that we're very proud to have worked with, that was announced last week. There is other targeted support. There is something in the pipeline, for example, looking at what Pacific communities might need. We have already had an announcement to support Māori communities and Māori business as another example. That targeted work will continue to happen. Kia ora.
Thank you, Marama. Also very efficient with the time. Question 3. What lessons, sorry, this is for James. Question 3. What lessons do you think we can bring forward when this crisis is over?
Well, it's a really great question, and there will be a list as long as my arm, or longer actually, I think, of lessons we can learn. I mean, certainly, you know, looking at the sort of New Zealand context, it does show that, you know, the level of preparedness that we have for a pandemic, you know, these things, we had a pandemic plan and all that kind of stuff, which was created in the absence of reality, if you like, and now we're testing it against reality. So far, it's holding up reasonably well, but there are 1,000 kind of incidents every day that occur that show up kind of contingencies that we hadn't thought of, and so on. So I think those sort of things. There's a lot, I think personally, in here to learn about how fragile the global system is when it comes to things like travel, supply chains of goods and services, manufacturing of things like medicines and medical supplies and all of that kind of stuff, at the point where every single country in the world is looking for respirators and testing kits and rubber gloves and masks and, you know, you name it. It sort of shows, I think, and maybe this is confirmation bias, but it sort of shows, I think, what the Greens have been saying for some decades, which is that a more sort of distributed network style economy is actually more resilient than a massive hub and spoke type arrangement, which is what we've currently got, although we're very rapidly rewriting it. I think there's also a lot here about that we can learn about how we hang together as families and as businesses and as communities in terms of the sort of setups that we've got. There are probably a lot of, in fact, I know that there's actually been quite a lot that we did learn from the Christchurch earthquake and the recovery that we've actually already started to apply. To say, well, there were some things that we did really well during the Christchurch recovery, a number of things that were done very poorly during that, and let's not repeat the mistakes of the past. So it's certainly something that I'm very interested in, is making sure that we catalogue those things, and not just kind of, I mean, we will be sort of rushing towards recovery as fast as we can, but we need to make sure that as we do that, that we build for a better future and not just kind of go back to the old ways that we had leading up to this point.
Kia ora, thank you, James. And just a reminder, if you're out there and you're listening and another question pops into your mind, feel free to fire that through on the chat. Now, actually, this next question is for you as well, James. What are your plans in regards to animal welfare?
All right, so that's actually the primary reason why vets have stayed open, because animal welfare is at risk, but particularly on farm animal welfare at a time like this. And so that is something that the government is paying attention to, and making sure that humans are looked after and have everything that they need, but also those that we share the planet with are also. Because we actually have had some questions about why a vet was considered essential services, because they don't provide a service to humans. But actually, you know, animal welfare is very important. It's very important to New Zealand.
Thank you. Now, the next question for Marama. Why is there no rent freeze while landlords get a 6-month mortgage repayment holiday?
Really important question. Everybody needs to be able to continue to live with decency, including people who rent. So the first thing is, it's not a mortgage holiday as such that has been negotiated, and that is a direct negotiation with people's banks. It is a deferral. So they still have to continue to pay down all of the debt. And what I don't want to see is where people who rent are that their rent is just backed up as a debt, and that they then have to pay their rent plus that debt on top of the rent. So we hear that concern, and it needs to be taken seriously, that when people have reduced income and when the current government assistance either doesn't cover your rent or nearly gobbles it all up, that we know this is of serious concern. I'm just going to do a quick sound check because we may come back to me. Can people still hear me through that rain? Sorta. Okay, I'll keep going. So we're hearing that concern very clearly and are taking that through with our relevant government ministers to try and work through that solution to make sure that people can still afford to live, can still afford to pay their other bills and get good, healthy care that they need. At this time, while landlords might get a 6-month mortgage repayment holiday, repayment deferral, they're still going to be left with those payments to make. But I understand that this is something of serious concern. So what we have negotiated is that no one will be able to be evicted, and that if people aren't able to pay their rent for 60 days, that we will still not be allowing evictions over this time of the lockdown. And that's something that we negotiated. And also that there is a freeze on rent increases. Even if your rent was due to increase before the lockdown, no rent can increase during this lockdown period.
Enough precautions for prison staff and inmates to keep them safe?
Sorry, Carl, who is that question for?
Oh, sorry, that was for Marama as well. I'll repeat the question. Are there enough precautions for prison staff and inmates to keep them safe?
I may ask if you can go to James.
Okay.
I'll wait for this rain a bit.
Okay, James.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting the rain that we've had the last couple of days. It's pretty intense and much needed in the north, I have to say. So at the moment, what's happened is we've restricted visits to prisons in order to make sure that we don't get community transmission within a prison. And actually, as long as that remains true, then there is little to no danger of transmission. But it is something that Kelvin Davis, who's the Minister of Corrections, is very concerned about, and they are looking at contingency planning. At the moment, however, what they're saying is that actually the prisons are secure, and that the chances of transmission into a prison environment are minimal.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. And James, this next question is for you as well. What opportunities are there for advancing the green agenda?
Well, I mean, obviously at this point in time, we're just dealing with the single greatest crisis that the country has seen since World War II, and trying to make sure that the impact on New Zealanders is as minimal as possible, although it will, I have to say, still be very significant. We also know that part of the recovery effort is going to be the government spending, frankly, a colossal amount of money on a huge public works program in virtually every sector, from housing to transport to energy to waste to conservation to rail to forestry, you name it, and that the effort there is going to be on things that get people back into employment, because we know we're going to see a big jump in unemployment in the coming months. Things that are distributed around the country and into the regions and the provinces, and also things that start to resolve some of the really long-term challenges that New Zealand has. Now, I'm going to put my climate change hat on for a second. There is an economic crisis about every 10 years on average. And what happens is, when that occurs, everybody says, hunkers down and goes, okay, well, we just need to focus on getting through the crisis, and we'll worry about climate change and the environment later. You know, once we get back to business and we've got the money to kind of afford those sort of luxuries. Crisis goes on for about 2 or 3 years, and you slowly recover. And then after about 4 or 5 years, you get back to a level of kind of equilibrium where everybody's like, okay, pretty good. Things look like, you know, we're back on a roll. And we start to look to the longer term, and we go, oh, well, we really do need to do something about climate change. That lasts for 2 or 3 years, and then you have another crisis, and you repeat the cycle. And so that is one of the primary reasons why New Zealand has done such a poor job of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions over the course of the last 30 years, because every 10 years or so it's punctuated by one of these moments. And that really slows us down. And we also have this temptation to say, look, things are really bad. I just want them to go back to the way they were before the crisis. And so then what we do is we pump our economic regeneration activity into the same old brown economy that got us into this mess in the first place, rather than into the green economy for the future. We cannot do that anymore. We just don't have time. So we know that coming out the other side of this crisis, we have to do that in a way that locks us into a green pathway, really kind of low emissions economy that works for everybody, not back into the same old kind of what I would call the dirty brown economy that we had before the crisis. We're a part of those conversations as part of the government, and I know that there's an openness to that. And a desire, and I think an understanding that in the past, when we've built our way out of a crisis, that we haven't always done a very good job of it. And so it is very early days, but I think that we have an opportunity here to ensure that as we build back, that we build it in such a way that puts us onto a much better pathway than the one that we were on.
Kia ora. Thank you, James. So that's the end of the questions that we had preset. We're now going to move to some of the questions that have been coming through via the chat. So let me just have a look here. So the first one is a question again for you, James, from Pam from Nelson. Can we expect the same clarities and transparency if the situation deteriorates to the point where experts can see that 2 or even 3 months isolation will be required?
I believe so, yes. I mean, it's very important to the Prime Minister that people are really clear about what the situation is and what it requires of all of us, and what it requires of the government. I think she's done a pretty good job so far of providing that kind of clarity of direction for the country. So I know that it's personally important to her, and I also know that along the way, a lot of mistakes are going to be made, because we have very imperfect information, and the situation is incredibly fluid and very dynamic, and we're responding to things pretty much every single day. And so there will be moments where it feels like we don't have that clarity and that transparency, but certainly that is the intention.
Okay, thank you. Now, Rosalie and I'll start again. Rosalie and I have decided, because we do have time, we're going to take a speaking order and unmute people individually to ask their own questions, which is great. So the first person I have here on my speaking order is Emma, is it Koch? I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Koch.
Hello, Emma. K-O-C-H. Hi, Emma. Go ahead.
Kia ora. Hi. I've got an unusual question. So I want to introduce the concept of household sufficiency. This would be the household production of needs provision. So for that, we would need neighbourhood centre support. We can see the deficit. We need an economic reset. The first concept that popped into my mind was home earning and learning schemes, which would be really well needed now. As psychosocial support is an essential industry, an essential service, then it would benefit us to have neighbourhood centres open, even if we didn't use them. They could be lightly staffed through a crisis. And we're going to, over the coming years, it's 2020, we've got COVID, 2021, we don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be a flood or an earthquake. So we need to build community resilience, and we need mid-level structures that connect micro-level households to macro-level government and also industry. So is that a concept that is entered into the political discourse on the national level?
James or Marama, which would like you to jump on that one? Marama.
Marama here, happy to have a go. Not specifically down to that detail, Emma, no, in terms of that sort of in-home level of thinking, but I think that a broader community consciousness about prioritising collective health and mental, psychological well-being for everyone is something that the Green Party is particularly well placed to be able to input in those discussions at all levels. And what I want to say is what Grant keeps saying, which is that nothing is off the table right now. So I think this is the time for those ideas to come through. Emma, your idea is a really good example of what we can be looking to as we rebuild our country. Kia ora.
We need it in the rubbish. we need it in the rubbish. No, I want it in
Thank you, Emma. And apparently you need it in the rubbish. So lovely to hear. Pam and Nelson, you have a question on transparency. Please go ahead.
I think I've got that one.
Was that the one that I read out? Yes, it was. Okay, so next on the speaking order then is Ian Wells. Ian.
Hi, I had just several questions, but I guess I'll just ask one question. And that's, there's a lot of pressure because of the disease of tracking individuals. And I know some countries are pretty, don't respect human rights or privacy very much. What's the Green Party doing to protect our privacy as the pressure increases to track people to keep us healthy?
James, Marama, who would like to put their hand up for that one? James, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's definitely a live conversation in Cabinet, because when you declare a state of national emergency, that does come with some fairly extraordinary and wide-reaching powers, and so particularly now also that we've mostly closed down Parliament. We've had to sort of change how Parliament operates in order to ensure that there's still a level of check and balance over the executive as we go through this. The Privacy Act still applies, right? So that law hasn't changed and won't change. I know that there are things that are in development, using technology in order to improve our ability to track and trace, but they've still got to meet the requirements of the Privacy Act. And so the Privacy Commissioner has to be involved in approving those kinds of things. I also know that I've had some correspondence from some people, for example, who are worried about the fact that the police can stop them when they're out for a walk and send them home or possibly detain them. Unfortunately, having those powers is necessary at a moment like this because of public health and safety. and they'll probably get trialled more as the weeks go by than they have in the last few days. But what the police have told us so far is that the vast majority of people, if they've kind of stopped them to have a conversation, have said, oh, they didn't realise what the restrictions are and simply gone home. So I'm pretty comfortable with where things are at, but it's certainly something that we're keeping an eye on.
Thank you, James. Next on our speaking order is Katya. Katya and Mike, is that correct?
Yeah. I asked a number of questions, so I'll just keep it to one. That concerns everybody. And that's, is there a plan to roll out a comprehensive community-wide testing? And I'm going to use my own situation as an example, and that's that I've had a flu-like virus and I've never been tested to confirm or deny COVID-19. I do not believe it is COVID-19 as it's lasted longer than 14 days, but using that as an example, there could be people in the community spreading it and not knowing that they have it. So is there any sort of plan to roll out a comprehensive community-wide test?
Yeah, so there are new forms of testing that are becoming available over time. At the moment, what we're doing is we're saying that people who exhibit symptoms should get a test. If you have a range of symptoms that are close to it, then you probably should try and insist on getting tested. The rate of testing has dramatically increased over the course of the last week, in fact. So I think about a week ago, we got up to 1,000 tests a day, and I think in the last 24 hours we got up to about 3,200 tests a day, and so that is increasing. And I do know that there are work streams happening at the Ministry of Health for different types of testing that you could move much more quickly and across a broader population group, but they're not the same as the sort of tests that we've been using, because those are, ones that require a swab, which then gets into a lab. It takes about 24 hours to turn that around, and so then you don't get the results for sort of 24 to 48 hours. And in order to do what you're talking about, which is essentially test as much of the population as you can, you need a different type of testing.
Marama here. I'll just add that the Prime Minister sent a very clear directive today that now that we're at the increased capacity of over 3,000 tests a day, urging all clinicians to really use their discretion and test people if they think they need to be tested. So there's definitely a move in that direction of broader, wider testing, but support what James has said about the community level testing.
I will say I was denied a test today.
Oh, good.
I was denied a test.
Oh.
Okay.
On what grounds?
That a certain GP did not think I needed it despite having symptoms.
Okay, so I'll tell you, Katya, the best thing for you to do is to drop us an email about that. But the Prime Minister, I don't think could have been any clearer. If people are exhibiting symptoms, then they should be tested.
Okay, I will drop you an email.
Okay, thank you, Katya. Next up, we have Thomas with a question about small business, I believe.
Yeah, hi. I'm just making these shields for our local health providers with my 3D printer, and getting into this. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Looks like this, and the local doctors, they're really happy to get those because they had virtually not that much. And anyway, so I'm making those. I'll make as many as I can. But just before the session here, my little printer had a bit of a wobbly, and I'm worried where I would get the spare parts from if I need them. It's already interesting that I had to rely on community contacts to get these clear visor plastics. They actually cover sheets from reports that real estate agents would put on their things. And so I can't order this right now. I don't know where to get it. I can't order it. I can't order the printing material for my 3D printer either. So luckily I'm a teacher, and I knew at school there was some, and there was an exception made for me to go in there and get some of the material that I'm now using. And so it's extremely hard. So it puts a focus on the fact that our society is so extremely networked that if you break those chains, then perhaps a lot of essential services will crumble on stupid little things that they can't get because somebody who could supply this is not an essential supplier to that company, and all of a sudden you have something breaking down, maybe a transformer at a power station or whatever, and due to some stupid little thing, it can't be fixed because we broke everything. So what do we do?
James, Marama, who would like to pick that up?
I will. So there is a possibility that you haven't been able to get the plastic because it's being bought up by another manufacturer in New Zealand to produce some face masks at the moment, but you don't have visibility of that. I think that's what I was saying. Somebody asked before, what are some of the lessons that we can learn here? I think the fact that you've got a 3D printer and the ability to knock those out even on a small scale to help support some of your local GPs is fantastic. And those are the kinds of things that it would be great to see more of in the future. There are some things that we at the moment have no capacity to produce in New Zealand, and some of the pharmaceuticals are in that category. But usefully, actually, when it comes to personal protective equipment, there are manufacturers in New Zealand who have been producing other things that are retooling really quickly. And so it's one of the reasons why we've got a lot of face masks and other gear that's coming, actually because they're being produced in Whanganui, which 2 weeks ago they weren't. They were doing something else. So I think one of the things that I'm kind of keen to see more of as a result of this is a better inventory of what supply chains we actually do have in the country and where there are weaknesses, and what we can do to shore things up so that the next time this happens, that we're more resilient.
Yeah, thanks, James. And the 3D printing network that seems to have jumped up out of nowhere is a wonderful community initiative. So great that you're involved in that, Thomas. We're going to take one more question from Juliet Neal, and then we'll move to close the meeting. So Juliet, your question.
Yes, my question is, what provisions can be made to help safeguard the mental health of people during isolation, not only in abusive relationships, but also those who are living in isolation alone?
I was going to ask if Kyle could, with your expertise, Kyle, have a go at that one.
Yeah, sure. Hey, thanks, Juliet. Let me just say, first of all, we're all struggling. One of the really hard things about being a therapist in this current climate is we're all in this together, which includes me, and all of the medical professionals, of which there are 2 in my house. I know that we're all struggling with the load of this. So we are all in this together, unfortunately, with the difficult bits too. The 2 main things that I've been talking to people about is first of all, it's really important to let everybody know that we're an essential service. So your services should be available to you, whether that's your standard counselling that you normally have, whether that's DHB services, whatever they might be, are open and accessible. And beyond that, I think, as strange as it might sound, it's about trying to make our day-to-day life in this bizarre context we now find ourselves as normal as possible. So translating as much of our life that we had before into this normal environment, whether that be work, whether that be taking time out on the weekend, or whether that be just having a schedule that we can set ourselves to stick to every day. That schedule is really important. And of course, the other thing which should be familiar to all of us because it's so dear to our hearts as a green value is connection. I was feeling quite out of sorts today throughout the course of the day, and I noticed just sitting here and talking with all of you and listening to you talk, even though it's through a screen, and even though I've got a green screen behind me, and even though I haven't met many of you in person, it's really settled me. And I think that value of actually being able to reach out to each other And I say this, if you are at home on your own now, make sure that you're reaching out to the people that you have. But perhaps more importantly, if you know of people in your community, whether that be neighbours or Facebook friends that you know who live on their own, reach out. Take it upon yourself that your job for the next few weeks is to make sure that everybody that you know is okay. And if we all do that, then we'll all get through this together, and we might even have some wonderful new friendships by the time we get to the end of it. Kia ora. Thank you. So that is the end of our questions for tonight. We do have a couple of things we want to achieve before we finish up, though. The first one is actually, again, just talking about our well-being. So in terms of that thinking and that structure and what you're actually doing for yourself, what I was going to do was to ask everybody just to jump on the chat and to sort of type out one thing that you're going to do for yourself tomorrow. But I'm actually going to jump to something different because of that question that Julie had answered. I'm going to encourage everybody, and you don't have to type it if you don't wish to, because it might be private, but to think of one person in your network that you're going to reach out to tomorrow, whether that be by phone or by video chat. Just one person that maybe you've fallen out of contact with, or you know who is on their own at home, to just a 5-minute call. So just take a moment to think about that and just make that commitment to yourself. And if you feel comfortable, jump on the chat and just name that person, or just recognize and acknowledge someone that you want to reach out to. It's great. I can see names jumping up already, which is lovely. And the other task that we have is we wanted to try and get a screenshot of everybody in gallery view. And what I might ask you all to do, so I'm just looking at the gallery view and seeing that the first page of people is obviously the ones who've got the video camera on. But if you feel comfortable turning that video camera on, I'm going to ask Rosalie to organise doing a bit of a group shot of us all. And if we could maybe just sort of put our hands in the air with the twinkling fingers. Look at that. Wonderful.
Awesome. Hopefully got that.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Marama, would it be okay if I could just call on you to close the hui that we've had tonight for us, please?
Absolutely. A big thank you to you, Kyle, for guiding us through a lot. How many do we reckon are on here? This is a fabulous call, guiding us through a bit of a discussion and some questions. This is not the end, whānau. This is the start or the continuation of us to keep having these Zoom hui, as Simon Anderson has just said. And I think we're hearing and we are practicing kindness. I think where Kyle left us is also to remember to be kind to ourselves. For example, in our workplace, our staff and our MPs are setting up working from home situations, and it doesn't always go smoothly. And this is an adjustment for everyone to figure out how to be productive when you've got all sorts of other things going on at what is often a cramped home space now. And I know that we maybe just have to give ourselves a little bit of credit for working through these adjustments and working together, and still trying to look out and care for the rest of our wider whānau in our community. So big aroha to everybody through this time. We're going to need sustained manaaki and sustained caring for everyone. I did my first go at the supermarket today, and I have to say that was quite a heightened stress situation. So then come back and be kind to ourselves and take some breather, make sure we're resting and socially connected but physically distant. So with that, I will close off with a karakia that many people may know at this time. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. That is, cease the winds to the west, Cease the winds to the south. Let the breezes blow over the land. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, everyone.
Paul Marie, have a good night.
Au Marie.
And that brings us to a close. So thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully we'll be able to set more of these up in the very near future to all stay connected with each other. Go safe, go well, and good night.